What if there was DevTools for designers? What if there was a Photoshop looking toolbar that plopped on a page and just did the stuff they expected when they clicked and hit delete? And it started out just me trying to empower all these designers. And I was like, I want to help you.
Hello, welcome to devtools-fm. This is a podcast about developer tools and the people who make them. I'm Andrew, and it's my co-host, Justin.
Hey, everyone. We're really excited to have Adam Argyle on. Adam, did I say that right?
You did. You are not Wes Boss, who continues to call me Argyle like he's a cold caller on my landline, but it's all good. Hey, you did well. You thought about the sweater. Well done.
Nice. Well, Adam, it's such a pleasure to have you on. You've done so many things, and we've just seen you online forever. So you're an ex-Googler. You were on the CSS Working Group, which I think is really awesome. You've done just like so many cool UI things, and we're really excited to talk about your work. I'm particularly a fan of VisBug, and I kind of show everyone who's like design adjacent, like, hey, look at this tool. It's so good. So incredibly excited to talk to you. But before we dig more into your story, would you like to just tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, I've been hacking since I was a tiny youth. Started in VRML, virtual reality modeling language. How fun is that, just to say out loud? And that was before the year 2000. They probably thought that was future language back then. In 2020, we're going to be hovering around in cars writing VRML all day, right? Anyway, I've worked for big companies, small companies, startups, not startups. I've been a consultant. Internally, like at Google. I would just go consultant. I worked at Google, worked at Deloitte. I've been making apps since the iPhone came out. And when the iPad came out is really when I started cutting my teeth hard into making full stack web applications. I did everything it took to make a beautiful application on the iPad 1. And I've just been kind of keeping up with that ever since. These days, it means I'm running multiple agents and prompting them to do my bidding as best as I can. And I'll reach in and tweak the code whenever they screw it up, which is usually just in the CSS. They're pretty good at ripping off everybody else's backend code. There's a little dig there, slight dig. And I was at Google for 7 years, a member of the CSS Working Group. I helped specs, which I think specs are actually, interestingly, a potential future for AI. I like Kiro and where it's headed with a communal space for us to not code together anymore, but to edit specs together. And I feel fortunate that I spent so much time editing specs that way. And these days, I still fight for the user. So it's been 20 years. All I want is good user experiences. I like to play good video games, damn it. And so I want good apps too, we should be spending the same amount of time to make those things awesome and enjoyable. I have a thing. It's like, I don't like MVPs, minimally viable products. I hate them. Would you like to use my minimally viable car? How about my minimally viable dinner? And you're like, that sounds terrible. I do. I'm not against minimal things. I like minimal things. It's that I want an MDP, a minimally desirable product. Giving me, look, I can have a minimally desirable dinner. That sounds great. Give me a minimally desirable car. That's great. I just don't want your MVP. So stop selling it to me like it's something great. Anyway, that was a lot and a little at the same time. I hope that was good.
Yeah, that definitely squares with the work I've seen from you on the internet. I wouldn't describe your style as minimalist at all. It feels like maximalist in a lot of different ways.
It's like I like sushi, where it's like sushi packs so much flavor and so much creativity in such a small vessel. I try to do the same thing with the way that I build applications. I like to be a sushi chef, where it's like, hey, that's just an accordion details element. You're like, but it's delightful. He added little thingies. They did thingies, and now it's cooler than the minimal one. And anyway, I'm glad you noticed. Thanks, Andrew.
So you gave us a little taste of it there, but what initially got you into web development? Like, you have such a deep focus on CSS and like browser specs and browser tooling. What led you down that path?
Yeah, so it was a love of visual art, a love of games. I mean, and it's like a classic 80s baby. I was building MySpace pages and customizing my bands. But it mostly came down to like in school, when I started going to school for computer science, I was in Java classes, PHP classes, SQL classes. I was learning about all these concepts. And then all of a sudden we came to Flash. And I noticed I was playing like a lot of Guitar Hero at the time. And Flash gave me this opportunity to not just make something functional, but to add all sorts of pizzazz. And I liked Pizzazz because I was noticing that like when we built our Java applets that we ran on our console, all the other kids in the class were like, yay, it did the math. Look at my console. It's the right number. And I was like, you're happy with that? No one wants that. I mean, people will pay for it, I guess, but like no user wants that. Like, I don't want that. Do you want that? And so I would always go this extra mile to make it nice and to make it something visual. And I realized really quickly I was the weirdo. I was the weirdo in the room. Everyone else was like, yeah, dude, we're super happy. Yours is, it's cool or whatever. You know, you could see it on their face. Like, we just don't care. And I was like, well, apparently I care. So I switched schools. I switched from intense computer science into intense design. And I went to design school and I learned all about typography. Like I would trace letters, like the whole classic typography thing. I was in there doing that. But at the same time I was taking art classes, I was at an agency building iPad apps. So that's like a lot of my weird two brains, everything coming together. All this has like been almost since the beginning. I was in Fireworks, the design tool, or Illustrator, while I was also in Dreamweaver and I was also in VRML. I just been that sort of like, I liked both. I want them to be visual and I wanted to understand how it worked. That's the cool part to me. And it kept on going. And eventually that led me to like wanting to enable others around me. I was like, hey, how come you're not doing this stuff? Isn't this fun? Look at me. I make a thing and then it's artful too. And they're like, I can't do that. I was like, let me help you. I'll make a tool. And like you talked about VisBug. VisBug being sort of like one of the, well, it's pretty popular. Anyway, whatever. It got a lot of cool steam in it, and it helped me launch my career in a certain way at Google, which was nice. And the way that formed was I was on Google Cloud. I was a UX engineer. I was building prototypes for the next version of Google Cloud. So I was like really making these animated, awesome next gen prototypes. And then I was also helping the team work on the design system of Google Cloud. And when you sit down with a designer, they don't want complex things. They sit down and they're like, hey, the spacing right there is a little off. And you're like, it is off. Let's fix it. And they're like, I can't fix it. And you're like, you can with this tool I made. Because to them, like they'd see me open up DevTools and it's like the Lamborghini hood pops open and you're like, hey, don't be scared. Don't be scared. I know it's complex looking, but if you reach your hand right around that little part right there and you tweak just a little bit, you can change the color of the car. And the designers look at you and they're like, I'm not reaching my hand in the engine to change the car color. And that's when I was like, I think I can make this easier for people. What if there was DevTools for designers? What if there was a Photoshop looking toolbar that plopped on a page and just did the stuff they expected when they clicked and hit delete? And it started out just me trying to empower all these designers that had innocent requests. And they wanted to hack on production, man. They wanted to work on the actual product. Can you believe it? Instead of in their dreamland on an artboard, they wanted to work on production. And I was like, I want to help you. And so VisBug was a DevTools inspired tool for designers to go poke, inspect, tweak, and screenshot how it should be and send it over the fence, back over the fence to be like, hey, developers, I don't know how you're writing your CSS, SAS, or whatever. I don't care. But this padding is wrong. Fix it. I don't care if you use a variable, whatever. This is the value it should be. Do what it takes in the system. Mr. Systems, man. You like the systems. I like the colors, so here's the right color. You do the system. Anyway, and it's been really popular for a long time. No marketing, other than it like releasing under Google Labs, but completely organic growth. It has 200,000 something monthly active users right now. It's built entirely on web components. Everyone's like, web components can't do anything. And I'm like, psh. Okay, tell that to the Photoshop web experience. That's built on. Say that to iTunes. Say that to VisBug. It's a wildly capable component model. Just people don't like it. I think that's really where we're at. They're like, I like the thing I'm good at. You're like, I see what you're saying. You like JSX and stuff. Okay. Anyway, that was a long-winded thing, but yeah, VisBug was definitely born out of me staying hybrid, wanting to enable people. And that's why I like to teach. That's how I got the job as DevRel at CSS on Chrome. I was like, hey, where's the CSS DevRel? You guys got like 6 JavaScript ones. And they were like, oh, you're right. I don't know why we don't have, hey, you do it. And I was like, I'm not smart enough for that sort of thing. I just like make design tooly stuff. Anyway, I accepted it and I give things my all and gave it my all for 6 years until it ended. But I have a lot of fun things to say along the way. Yep.
So while you were at Google, did you actually work on the DevTools? Given that you'd like kind of done all this work on VisBug?
I did. Yeah. So I started working with the DevTools team very directly. At first it was implementing things from VisBug. I sat down with here's a story. Want a little background story? When I joined the Chrome team after VisBug was doing well, we were talking to the DevTools team about integrating VisBug and just having it be a button you click and it would just launch. And at first, the guy who led it, he's known to be a stickler. Like DevTools is written in vanilla JavaScript, by the way. I don't know if you know that. The whole thing from the ground up always has been. I think now it's in TypeScript and maybe uses lit here and there. But y'all, that complex, the most complex app I think I've ever seen in my life, vanilla JavaScript. I'm just going to say that closer to the microphone so everyone can hear. Vanilla JavaScript can do really complex things, y'all. I don't know if you think it. I think you don't think it can. It can. Anyway, so it's vanilla JavaScript, and it was owned by like a small group of people that knew how it all worked. And they didn't like change. It's not because the code was, not solid. It was more like they knew that what they were balancing and juggling was state hell, right? Like they didn't own state, all sorts of things. They just had a stack of things against them and they didn't care. These folks powered through every single problem and always had a solution. Anyway, one day, sitting down with the dude and he's like, after he'd been telling me no for like weeks, he's like, dude, we can't do it. We can't just stick it in there. You stay as a Chrome extension. If it does well, we'll do other things, whatever. And then one day I show up next to him and he's like, hey, I did it. Took me 30 minutes last night. I put your tool, and my tool, the VisBug was no longer floating. It was to the other side. So DevTools opened up on the right-hand panel, VisBug showed up on the left-hand panel. And it was like a legit IDE vibe. You're like, I'm in a full-on designer DevTool thing. What's going on? Hey. And then that guy quit the next day. And it just never saw the light of day. It was just toast. The whole thing's toast. Another fun little story about that is back in the day. Do you remember Fireworks, the design tool?
Before my time.
Okay, Macromedia. This is like early Flash days, Illustrator days. Everyone was in Illustrator, Photoshop, or Fireworks. They were the three main ones. And Fireworks was unique because it was vector bit or pixel vector. Shit, they had a cool word for. They were hybrid. You edited path data and exported pixels optionally. So it was a hybrid. You didn't have to pick between Illustrator or Photoshop. You could be both in one design tool. And honestly, it was awesome. It had states and slices and all this crap that was really helpful for us at the time. But a Fireworks file was a PNG. It's a PNG file. And so you'd open up a PNG and all of a sudden it had all this rich editing capability, just like a design file. So it wasn't a PSD, it was a PNG. Turns out a PNG can stash an n number of values into its metadata. And so a PNG and so you previewed it. It looked like a preview on your desktop. You could see the thumbnail, but if you opened it up, it was huge. It was like 60 megabytes. And then when you open it in Fireworks, all the layers and all the things all popped out. You could save, early days in Chrome, someone figured out you could save an entire web page into a PNG. And so it was theorized that VisBug could then just be a PNG editor and the browser would unpack and pack the file for you. So imagine Dropbox is cloud syncing your production site into PNGs. Designers edit PNGs and the PNGs go back up. There's like a sync engine. Ha! I never saw the light of day, but wouldn't that have been cool? For like somehow we had like a design file that was like bridging the gap between all of our workloads. Anyway, VisBug was very fun at exposing the sort of deltas between like what a developer tool is and what a designer tool should be. How do we unite these folks to work on the same product together? And ultimately, like I wanted designers who fight for the user. Like I said earlier, I fight for the user. I wanted user or designers there to fight for the users because developers are decent at it, but let's be honest, developers tend to fight for themselves more often than they fight for the user. It's my speed, my experience, DX. All I think about is DX. UX, yeah, that's part of it, right? I think I get that when I install Shad. There's UX there. Hey, I got a chuckle out of Andrew. That's nice. Anyway, that's just me ranting about VisBug stuff. But I'm proud of that tool. It's been really great.
Yeah, I recently saw a post from you that it may not have gotten integrated into Chrome, but didn't get integrated into another browser.
It did. Orion. Someone sent me that too. Orion ships with design tools. And a friend of mine was like, design tools in the browser? What? How did they do this? And they go look it up and they hit the button, design tools, and VisBug slides out. So there's nothing in Orion about VisBug. It doesn't say launch VisBug, nothing like that. It just says launch design tools and they slide out. And I was so happy and so proud. It's an open source project. I'm like, fork it, run, baby. I don't really care. Enable those designers, make people feel powerful on that web page. And yeah, that's really, really cool stuff that's in there. Yeah, I'm really happy.
I think it's funny. That's by Coggy, right? The search engine.
Yes.
They're trying to be like a different Google. It's
I don't
an
know.
interesting interesting approach that they have. But it's cool. It's cool that it got integrated. I wonder, like, so what did you take to the dev tools for Chrome that like was inspired from like VisBug? Because I remember there was a time when like the dev tools weren't really that fun to work with. There's like, there's a lot of it's a really complex interface like you were talking about earlier, and we've gotten a lot more capabilities over time. So I'm curious if you're like contributed any of the sort of like learnings that you had from VisBug into the DevTools itself.
Awesome. Yes, there's two pathways to talk about. One is literally things that they took from VisBug and put into DevTools, and then the second one was like the long tail of my work was as new CSS features came out or HTML features. Both of those needed tooling, or we would argue they needed tooling. We're like, you can't release the top layer of the dialogue without giving people a way to see what's in the top layer or where it even is. I'm like, if it's just a completely opaque space, like that's asking for trouble. And we can simulate what it is or whatever it is we need to do. So the first part of the work was like one of the earliest things, VisBug features that made it in Chrome DevTools. So when you do inspect element from DevTools and you hover over elements, you'll see a preview of the font, the font size, the colors, maybe some of the contrast and a few other things. That's one tool of VisBug. It's the inspect tool, and that was made to give designers a quick scope. Any y'all gamers, shooter gamers, quick scoping? No. All right. Anyway, for anyone out there who doesn't know what quick scoping is, that's when someone runs around with a sniper gun and just imagine hands bopping in front of them, bob, 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 and then they see someone poke up on the rooftop. And for some reason, these psychos who play this game all day, they lift their scope to their eye and they shoot the person in like less than 1 second. I'm talking like 100 milliseconds. They point, scope in, zoom in, shoot the person, and defeat them or whatever, and then they just keep running. And I'm not a quick scoper. But I've always loved this concept of like macro to micro, forest for a tree. So that particular tool is capable of showing you the styles on a tree. And overnight, again, that same dude overnight was just like, oh, that's a great idea. All we do right now when you hover over an element is highlight the padding and the margins. We totally should show this little tooltippy thing. So all of a sudden a tooltippy thing popped in there. And I had other like color tools. I had guides. I had measurement tools. There's like all sorts of things and you can see rulers in DevTools if you go turn them on. Anyway, okay, so there's like certain tools and aspects that they found really compelling. And also here's one really interesting thing about VisBug is VisBug exclusively works on collections. So a lot of times when you build an app that can select things, you'll start out by managing state and say, the selected item is this one. Right? And you say, state selected is equals this element or whatever. VisBug always assumes a collection. So there's never one selected item. There's always many. And a power of VisBug over DevTools. DevTools can only select a node at a time. I don't know if you've ever thought about that, but you can only see the styles for one thing at a time. And VisBug allowed you to hold shift with that inspect tool and just be like, bing, 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 show me 5 different elements, styles at once. And then I can compare them to see the delta. Maybe the colors are off or something like that. So anyway, it's just kind of fun. VisBug always worked on collection. And so DevTools starts borrowing all these features, and then all these new HTML and CSS features come out, and they refer to us almost like consultants on the CSS kind of Chrome DevRel team about like, hey, how do we visualize this? How do we help people feel empowered by this? Because we wanted to release new CSS features with an associated tool. We felt it drastically helped adoption and helped developers feel empowered by the features. So again, it was me wanting to empower those around me to get that stuff going. And that turned into things like I had a whole document at one time with like tons of different tools. And I tried to pitch DevTools not changing their entire tool set. The first thing I did was pitch to, okay, so nod along if you know that CSS is a fully typed language.
Fully typed?
It's a fully typed, and it's enforced at runtime. Nod your head if you know. No, it's nodding their head. So yes, CSS is fully typed. You've tried to put a color where a pixel value should go, right? You're like, font size, red. Does the application crash? JavaScript would. JavaScript would be like, and if you've assigned a value that I cannot do this operation on, I'm going to crash the whole thing. CSS doesn't care. it just steamrolls it and it says, well, is there another valid one that's trying to assign me? They're going to win, whoever they are somewhere. And it's a typed language. The font size can only accept a length percentage. That's a typed variable that is typed of other subtypes, which is length and percentage. Right? So it's very much like TypeScript. If you wanted to, you could do the whole CSS language from top to bottom as a type safe and developer IDE-centric experience that only shows you valid values that you can provide at certain times and would show you red squigglies. Just no one's built it. I'm not sad. In fact, I'm really sad. I'm really angry and no one's built that, but we're probably past that at this point with AI showing up. So anyway, the first thing that I pitched the Chrome DevTools team was they were called typed components, and they were for CSS types. So if you saw a CSS length unit, like a pixel value, I was like, here's all the things users should be able to do with pixels that they do in design tools. They should be able to drag that to the right and to the left to make it go up and down. If they hold shift, it should go up by 10 and down by 10. Like here's the modifier keys, and I built prototypes, and we built that into DevTools. We also built the rotation, like an angle tool. So anytime an angle is used as a value, the DevTools can assume this angle tool can empower a designer or developer to tweak the angle. There was also, anyway, so this is what I meant by like type centric. There was a gradient type tools, like it looked at color stops and it had, anyway, it's focusing on types because then they were like small and bite sized and they could chew off what they could as they went. But DevTools was continually, their funding was cut year after year. And so we saw a slowdown on fun features and a survival instinct kicked in as people are like, they're eliminating us every year. What do we do? And we're like, I don't know, but I don't know if you've seen DevTools team, but we are smoking in CSS land. Features are rolling out fast. And they were like, yeah, we can't keep up. And we were like, well, we know, but we're not going to hold it over your head. It's okay. We were really nice to them. So anything that they could produce was always good, but we were constantly consulting them on, we wanted developers to feel empowered. So yeah, how to expose all the intricacies to people. Yeah.
Yeah, I love some of those tools that you guys added. I'm pretty sure the box shadow one was another one in there because like
that was an early one. Yeah, it had the little the dots you could pull around.
Yeah, when I try to ignore box shadows for a long time and just use that, and just because of using that, like the transition to like actual values was a lot easier because I was like, oh, I know they're similar to the sliders.
Yeah, the easing tool is another one that had an early implementation, but later we drastically enhanced it, especially when linear came out. The linear easing function needed some changes to the easing getter. We had a whole typography one because there is a typography one. It was built by an intern. That's so weird. So lots of features in DevTools, even in Google in general, were like intern work. So you'd have like interns building really cool user-facing things. And I'd be sitting there going, why don't you ask me? I would love to build this tool, and then I would, and then I could maintain it after the internship's done or whatever. But those folks leave, and so we'd inherit it was an MVP. It was a typography tool MVP, and it had weird limits. Like, why is the max font size 72 pixels? Can I use rems? Can I use ems? The answer was no. Like, well, then this is dead to me kind of immediately, but whatever. We wanted to enhance so many of these little tools that were for those moments. Yeah, box shadow tool, text shadow tool. There used to be a moment where you could hover in the styles pane, and in the bottom right, these little icons would pop up. We told no one that they were even there, and you'd have to click them to just experiment. You'd be like, what's that one doing? And it would open up something like the font tool or the shadow tool. Pretty funny. Had some growth issues there in DevTools as the styles pane started to get very overloaded. That element list, that styles list of all the styles being applied and all the cascade layers and all it got really hairy really fast. Yeah.
Especially if you have a bunch of CSS variables at the top level, it's just like enormous list.
Enormous list. Yep. Tailwind. Yep. You're always like scrolling past all the things. You're like, I don't need any of those. Okay. Yep.
What do you feel like of the current like generation of DevTools? What are the areas that still like we don't have good enough tooling? What's lacking in our current DevTools?
Well, CSS. That's the easy one to say. I'm still and I waffle back and forth, but I still believe that it's a shame that many of our previewing tools for like whether it's like a design tool or something like that, there's so many synthetic renderings of stuff. And I want to see more design tools that can kind of live with developer tools because they're rendering reality. Like a good example is like Figma is in its own la la land. You know, like you're like, I'm writing Flexbox. And you're like, no, you're not. That's synthetic Flexbox. You're like, what do you mean? Well, you've only got like 25% of the features of Flexbox in that tool. And they're like, oh. And then even when it does output Flexbox, it's like verbose whack Flexbox. And it's like, you don't even want the junk that comes. I mean, maybe it's changed, but like I want designers to live closer to the reality. I want them to work inside of the Chrome renderers. That's like another thing that VisBug had going for it. It was like, that was your real product. Any tweaks you made, while they were temporary, they were tweaks in the real place that your app lives. So there's none of this dual world mentality that we had to do. So I'd love to see more unification of just where we spend our time seeing and interacting with the tool, and giving people more power in the space where we're all supposed to be together. But maybe that ends up being specs. Like, honestly, I think Kiro is a good example where like designers could stop worrying about design and development land or code at all and just start collaborating in specs. And the specs, we change the specs as a team, and all of a sudden the app changes. That could be kind of fun. I don't know.
Yeah, there's so many foot guns when trying to translate a Figma design to like actual code. Like how they do borders. Like, I don't know why they ever put borders on top of the border. Like, why did they even make that an option? Same thing with like filtering between layers. It's so different from going from Figma to an actual browser that it's like you just have to tell designers not to do the fun stuff sometimes.
Yeah. Yep. Color. I mean, color isn't really complex. We all think color's just like a primary color. No, color's wildly complex. Even units. Here's a question. How many CSS units does CSS have now? So if this is like pixels is one, the IC unit representing the water character in Japanese. I'm sure you know about the IC unit. Yeah, no worries. No, I was kidding. Yeah, no one knows about that one. The character unit, the CH unit. Anyway, there's how many wild guesses at how many units there are in CSS now?
I'd have to say it's like dozens, because I know there's like LVH and like all the different view height ones. It's kind of endless.
There's 54, and you're right though. Yeah, over half of them are the viewport units, because you got VW, LVW, SVW, DVW, and then you have the logical variants of all of them, and that accounts for over half of the total. So like we think of 54, like that's wild, but and then you have your container units. So you have container width, container height, container inline, container block. But yeah, that's something too. I'd like to see, like, there's a reason all those units exist. It's not like some CSS fanatics were like, more units are what we need. We shall create more for no one. No, it's like, no, these units have like wildly legit use cases. And I feel like it's one of my superpowers, is like knowing what units are available. Like, you're not going to ask your AI to give you a relative unit or an adaptive unit to the viewport or whatever. You're just gonna be like, make the font size bigger. And you're gonna be like, and I'll auto accept YOLO, whatever you say. And so I'm over there like, no, I want these kind of units, like I'm very specific about what I want. And so I feel a little bit more equipped sometimes to tell something what to do because I have the articulation for it. But anyway, that's a little besides the point. But yeah, CSS, it's wild. It's growing a lot.
It has grown a lot. The capabilities are kind of incredible. The container queries in particular are like one of my favorite recent features. That's just so good. Super
good. Did you see container state queries? So there's also style queries. Have you seen those?
Yeah.
So those are cool. The state queries are cool, where you can ask scroll state, like, hey, am I stuck or not? Is one of me snapped? Which one is snapped? Am I snapped? Something is snapped? Cool, I'd like to know what's snapped. Am I even overflowing? Is a scroll bar showing? And that's just a CSS query you can make now on the container. It's pretty neat stuff. Yeah.
That's one thing that's always been a pain for me is custom scroll bars, custom styled scroll bars. It's like something that like I like really hate doing, always want to avoid. And then like there's some PM or some designer saying, but it looks so bad on Windows. And I'm like, well, what do I do about that?
Yeah, they've got new scroll bars now. They're called Fluent. I'm a scroll. I don't even know if you're bringing up scroll that you know that I'm like a scroll knowledge dork, but I know a lot about scroll. That was my talk at CSS Day just a few months ago, was making beautiful scroll experiences. And I use the WebKit scroll bar styling, and I make one that's just chef's kiss. It's nice. And then I'm like, and then we'll upgrade to the newer version if those aren't supported, which is basically Firefox and saying, here's the accent color, here's the color of the thumb, and here's the color of the track type of deal. And then we're trying to make them as beautiful as possible, as integrated. I want the scroll bars to look integrated. The problem statement was the same as your designers and your PMs. It's like they don't look integrated. The scroll bars look foreign to the system. How do we fix that? And so the whole talk was oriented in how to make your scroll bars, how to have your cake and eat it too, making beautiful scroll bars. And those are touchy though. Some users show up and they're like, why'd you touch my scroll bars? Like now I don't know what to scroll or what to grab, blah, 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 blah. They're just like lost. And then I don't know what to say to them other than like apply a user style. Like your user styles in your browser will always win. Just strip them out. I don't know. If you see overflow, just make sure it's never there. That's not really nice to say to anybody, but yeah, it's a hard space customizing those scroll bars, and it's not easier. In fact, there's a now standard way to style a scroll bar, and it's very hamstrung in its capability, and it's because users have an expectation of what a system scroll bar looks like. And so I empathize, where it's like, as soon as you change the scroll bar, they go, where's the scroll bar? And you're like, it's where scroll bars always are. And they're like, but it doesn't look like my normal one. So it's not natural for me. And I don't immediately gravitate towards it. And you're like, well, that's a really good thing to say. I don't know how to tell you. Yeah, it's tough.
Yeah, that conversation's very top of mind for me right now. I've spent literally 8+ hours this week trying to fix a scroll bar problem, and with all my might trying to avoid implementing a custom scroll bar, because that just opens up whole new cans of worms that I don't even want to talk to people about.
Yeah. Oh, you mean custom scroll bar? Like you have to draw the thumb and draw the track, and you're like listening for, oh yeah, that's bad news. There's so many things in there that you don't even know exist. And that's one of the first parts of my talk is I'm like, people, the scroll bar over 30 years has so many features you don't even know. Like if you were to go build this from scratch, the amount of keyboard hotkeys you'd have to support so that users can do, it's just crazy. And then directionality, and then international directionality. I'm like, I can stack this on you for days, and you're gonna be like, I shouldn't make my own custom one. But have you seen the new kind of specs for scroll buttons and scroll markers, where you can create dots from CSS? So you can create the buttons and the dots all from CSS, that the dots articulate scroll to areas. So you'd say, hey, this element, this image in this thing, produce a dot for every image in this scroller. And it goes dot, 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 dot. And it's dynamic. So you add elements to it, more dots show up, you remove. Anyway, and then scroll buttons too. So you don't have to wire those up yourself. They'll always scroll the scroller in the same way that not the same way, but you know how like some scrollers have arrows on the top and the bottom? And they nudge the scroller by like 2 pixels. And then I see people click that. I'm like, I am really frustrated watching you click that button. Okay, but hey, you scroll your way, whatever, So like you can also create scroll buttons, which essentially do like a page up or a page down or a page left and a page right. So when the user clicks them, they scroll almost 100%, but enough to keep a little bit of a peek into where you came from, so you're not disoriented. So it's just like really thoughtful stuff the browsers do for scrolling. I agree, Andrew. You should not get in there and customize it if you can do it. But wait, I want to hear more. Tell me what you're building.
So we have a data table. It doesn't use browser scroll for some various reasons that we can't work around. So
yeah, infinite scroll. Yeah, probably just a recycler view. It's got to append, and yeah, you're trying to show 10,000 rows. Yep.
And so our current scroller thing leans into the browser scrollers, but tries to measure them to reserve space for them. And that works in all the cases except when you're on Mac OS and only have a trackpad. Because lo and behold, scroll bars have 0 width and height when you have a trackpad, and
when they're in overlay mode, yeah.
When you haven't actually scrolled it. So because of that one thing, we kind of have to kind of rethink a whole lot of it. And no fun to code.
I've built a lot of infinite lists that had lazy rendering and conditional rendering and viewport awareness. And have you heard of, I don't mean to like sidetrack, like I'm sure your solution is awesome. Have you heard of content visibility and contain intrinsic size, the 2 CSS properties and their values?
I've heard of them, but not how they might relate to this scroll issue I have.
Okay, let's say your Spotify, you got a playlist of 10,000 songs in it. There's a massive benefit you have to knowing that each row is the same height And if you know that all your rows are the same height, you can tell the browser, contain intrinsic size. Here's the height that I know they're always going to be, 100 pixels. Let's just say it's 100 pixels. So the browser goes, all right, well, now I can assume every one of these 10,000 nodes is 1,000 pixels high. I can immediately draw the scroll bar size because I don't have to render 10,000 to discover the height. I know the height. Okay, so that's step one. Contain intrinsic size. You hint to the browser about the rendered size of this node as it enters the viewport. Second thing is content visibility auto. And this tells the browser, hey, it's okay to not render this if you think that's okay. So with those two CSS properties on your list of 10,000 items, the browser will only render the ones in view. You can grab the thumb on the right and whip to the very bottom of the scroll bar and get a perfectly fast render of those last 100,000 items or whatever. Scroll up, scroll down, and the browser basically does all the recycling and all the optimizations needed to only render what's in view. And because you gave it that height and you told it it's okay to toggle the visibility, it does it all. So you literally could then go, oh, is this playlist 100,000 items? Browser doesn't care. The entire thing is virtualized at that point. And the browser is in control of that entire render path. And that's a fun way to a quick win for a humongous scrolling area is to use contain intrinsic size and content visibility. It offloads a crap load of work to the browser, and they can do it when needed.
Yeah, I'll definitely have to look into that. I don't think that might relate to this particular problem I'm having, but for just virtualized lists, that seems like such a great go-to. React is currently working on a off-screen thing where they don't run any of their React for off-screen stuff. So if you have a bunch of state that's in your virtualized rows, it can like pause that and stop work on those and then use it when it comes back into view. Pairing those two things seems like you have like an instant like good virtualizer.
Totally. That was like what I got into React for in the beginning. The first React component was literally an infinite list. That was the value prop. Was look at how we can render 10,000. And I was stoked because I was using a plugin called iScroll4. And then I rebuilt my own scroll. So yeah, that was its own. It rebuilt scroll from scratch just to do the infinite list. This is Cubic. This is so dumb. I can't remember my neighbors' names that like live down the street or other names from kids at the parent, but I can remember stupid JavaScript libraries from 15 years ago. I hate it. Anyway, Cubic, if you're out there, that's a really cool tool. Oh yeah, it's iScroll4. Anyway, React came out and it was like we're just a component model. We're not a framework. We just conditionally render based on some rules that you give us. And I was like, that's cool. And they had the infinite list demo. And I was like, that's a really nice infinite list. And I just finished working with Windows 8, had an entire HTML framework for building apps on Windows 8. It's called WinJS. And their list view component is fantastic. Still better than I've ever seen anything to this date. It worked and was made to run on really crappy tiny CPUs. And it was very programmatic though, where like it wasn't declarative. You would get a callback for every single item that was nearing the viewport and it would pass you the data. So you would give it this whole big data and a render function and it would do all of the skeletons for you. So it would skeleton pseudo render, infinite list, conditionally render everything. And if your element was coming into view within the right amount of time and everything, you would get your render function called with a piece of data, and you'd have to build up the DOM using document create element and stuff, which I still think is great. I know a bunch of people are like, I hate it. And I'm like, that's fine, whatever. But I also used to build stuff in Flash where I was like, draw a rectangle, here's the width. So like to me, like the DOM is like does so much sizing for me. I'm like not annoyed by it. But anyway, the WinJS list view, phenomenal. And it also could do this thing called semantic zoom. It also had grouped list views. Everything was virtualized. Everything was always blazing fast. I still haven't found one that's that good to date. But maybe React will do it finally with this like in view and out of view sort of conditional rendering. Maybe it's an early exit. Maybe it's a pause. I don't know. It sounds cool. It sounds cooler to say it's pausing. We paused it. The promise is just unresolved. And you're like, that's great. We love promises.
Yeah. React is doing some magical stuff these days. It's be interesting to see what they come up with.
Yeah, did you see jQuery 4 alpha beta or alpha just got announced or whatever? They're like, we're still kicking.
What's new in the world of jQuery?
I have no idea, other than they're like releasing a new version. It's probably smaller than ever before because the browser does more stuff. But
I'm sure.
Anyway,
That must be nice for them though, right? They're like, oh, all these like old like hacks and stuff that we did, we can just like start removing a bunch of these and hopefully still have the same compatibility or whatever.
totally.
It's got to feel cathartic. So I want to talk a little bit more about your time on the CSS Working Group. So like,
Yeah.
what was that process like? What kind of features did you contribute to? And I don't know, what'd you learn from it?
Nice. Yeah, so I have plenty to say. The specs that I worked on that I got added as an editor to was Color 4 and Color 5. Scroll 2, which was a lot of scroll snap features. So I worked a lot on the scroll end JavaScript function, programmatic access to managing scrolling, CSS scroll features. I did a lot in scroll. What else was I a spec editor? I feel like there was one or two other things. Anyway, so to become a spec editor, let's just chat about that. Like, what does that mean? How did you become a spec editor? I was in the meetings, I was in the calls, I was expressing concerns or validations or different comments, whether it was in the call or through GitHub, about these various things. And I was interested. I had needs that I wanted to see. I study so many design tools that I'm just like, here's what they're doing here. Like, we're going to get that as developers. That's what they're handing us. And we need ways to take it forward or whatever it was. And so you get involved in these conversations. They start to, problems get articulated or new features get articulated. And as soon as everyone agrees, they're like, yes, that new feature would be great. They're like, who's going to write it? Someone's got to go do the hard work now. And I would get either raise my hand or be suggested as someone that edits that, as sort of like a knowledge expert who knew either the problem space or the solution space. Oh, CSS nesting was another one I did. Nesting was because I was like, we need this. It's every preprocessor does it. We would ship smaller CSS files, like blah, blah, blah. There's like 100 reasons that we needed CSS nesting. And they were like, yeah, but it's complex. It's going to need, and so they assigned it to me, and I worked on that with Tab. So Tab knew how it worked, and I knew what people were doing with nesting today. And together we built a spec that hoped to make browsers happy and users happy. And in those meetings, they could be kind sometimes, and they could sometimes be quite rough. A lot of times, the rough sides were people not feeling heard. You know, you have a group of people, and someone shares a thought, and then everyone continues talking about something else or whatever, and that person would be like, I'm not being listened to, and they'd get upset, or literally no one would be listening to them, and it was totally valid. And there's also some mean people. There's like people that were like strong voices. So maybe they're not mean people. Everyone there was a nice person. Just sometimes if you squinted, they sounded really mean or mad. And you'd have to be like, I'm going to just take this with a grain of salt. This person's just very passionate about this particular thing they're saying. Oh, here's fun. Have you ever heard of the FG scale?
No, sir.
The FG scale is a way to articulate how much you care about something. FG stands for the F word given, F's given. And so like in a scenario where like 5 people are talking about this thing, and they're like, you could tell someone gives a lot more FGs than someone else. I always just liked when people could talk about that. So we used to do, planning poker. Did you ever play planning poker? Mm-hmm. Trying to figure out how many points or t-shirt sizes things are. And so whenever we had a battle, this is at like one of the agencies I was at, whenever we had a battle about how long or how difficult something was going to be, and we'd start to argue about it, I'd be like, this is way harder than you think it is. And they'd be like, nuh-uh, I've done it before. It's super easy. I'd be like, you're misaccounting for this. And all of a sudden they'd be like, everyone hold up how many FGs. How many FGs do you care about this particular thing? And I'd be like, 4 FGs. And they're like, damn, he put 4 FGs down. He's really okay. Adam, you take it. You own it now. You put all your FGs in there. It's yours. You think it's hard? Let's show us. Like you own it now. And I always liked the FG scale. It was like this like weirdly blunt way of quickly articulating how much passion you had for something or whatever. Anyway, so the community group would have these moments where there's kind of butting heads, and they'd have to generally cut the call at that time, or cut that conversation off and go, okay. It's clear there's no resolution is going to happen today. We're going to go kick it to comments until next week or maybe 2 weeks meeting down the line. And so it was illuminating, though, to see the amount of people participating. So in a design system, for example, you might have some owners, but usually there's like a group that kind of owns the whole thing. Imagine instead, no one owned the design system, but you had anyone who used it in any form. You had invited expert from each of those groups. And they were the ones working on the design system. And then the people who are building the design system have to listen to whatever that community group is doing. And that's basically how the browsers work. The people who build the browser don't get just go put willy-nilly stuff into the browser. They have to do the things coming through this approved and communal space. And it was kind of cool. But yeah, you'd have a design team that's like has input from the product managers, and then input from the backend team, and input from a database team. You're like, why is it? Because they render rows and tables, and they're interested in the table component. And so even in the CSS working group, you'd have people very hyper focused on one specific thing. And it was awesome because it'd be like, all right, so hey, we need CSS masonry, for example, big topic right now, lots of conversation around it. There's only a few layout specialists, and it's important to have them on the team because while we all can talk about what we want, they're much closer to the implementation details and how it can actually get built, or how it will be spec'd. And then you have the browser people coming in. It's like, well, I'm going to write the code that actually puts the boxes in the right spot. So you need their input as well. And so it's just really nice. You get this healthy amount of input from anyone who's a specialist in a particular field. Color was another one. Print was one. So you'd have someone there who's always there thinking about print. Oh yeah, we have display masonry. Okay, what happens when I hit Command P? And literally, like, what happens if you hit Command P right now and something has display grid, not even masonry, just display grid? Over half the time, it's a shitty print. It's not going to look like your CSS grid. It's because as tons more work, and the browser teams don't hire enough people to work on them, and so they're like, they have to cut corners somewhere, and print often gets. But then you have a CSS specialist. But the thing is, the spec is ready because the person who's in the CSS working group is there owning it and making sure it's all good. And so I felt my role in the CSS working group was, because I'm a builder and I've been building apps for 25 years. Most of the people on the CSS working group don't build apps. They don't even really build websites anymore. And the people that build browser engines don't build websites or apps. I think that's so weird. Small tangent side note, that I found one type of engineer, at least that I've seen in this world, can build the thing and make stuff with it too. And that's luthiers, the people who make musical instruments. If they make a stringed instrument like a mandolin, or if they make banjos, or they make guitars, almost always you find a luthier who builds beautifully engineered instruments, can play them too. And for some reason, browser engineers, they don't know how to make websites. If they make a demo, you're like, my goodness, this is not just ugly. You're barely hanging in there, aren't you? But you're the one writing all the code behind what I write. That's so strange to me. I'm like, you don't know anything about the space, about what goes on after you write the code in the browser? Okay, it's cool. So anyway, that was a lot of ranting about the CSS working group. I hope I answered something. Or
that was super fascinating. It always surprises me that the web is as successful as it is, and it works as well as it does, and that it feels like it keeps getting better, because it seems like it would be a giant house of cards, but like, people do good work. They do say don't design by committee, but like sometimes.
Yeah, I think that's what's keeping it alive. It does move slower, but when it moves in good, healthy directions. And then the fact that they can't deprecate anything, that comes back to, that seems like the worst decision. And then it's consistently like the best one. Anytime I open up Xcode or Android Studio, I'm like, oh yeah, not deprecating things is great because my build doesn't work anymore in this new version of the IDE that doesn't give a crap about the IDE version that I used when I made the, oh my goodness, they're all just moving forward so fast and just canceling anything that was old. I'm like, oh, it's so nice the web doesn't do that.
That must make the working groups kind of feel very high stakes at times, because it's like what we commit to now is what we're going with. It's what we're locked into and what we have to support. Like, I know there's been a lot of arguments around like just where to define the masonry attributes. Like, should they be grid attributes? It's kind of a grid. Who's to say?
Yep. And that's what leads to a lot of the heated moments where people are like, we're going to have to live with these decisions forever. And so you don't want to let those decisions get made by just a couple of individuals. They need to get cross-referenced and cross-checked and tested and prototyped and validated before they make it in. There have been accidents. I watched a couple of them. And it's not like we were moving too fast. I guess we were moving fast enough to make decisions, but it was more like, okay, so a good example is Anchor, CSS anchoring, which only had a couple name changes to the properties, and some values were added that made things easier. But that was a review that came later after Chrome had prototyped, and that, the thing would be Chrome would spec it a year ago, continue bringing up spec issues week after week, just refining it, and it would be this like slow burn. And so all these people in the meetings are like, Anchor's not ready, and all of a sudden Chrome would be like, we prototyped the whole thing. And then everyone would be like, oh shit, time to go look at what it does, because we're all noobs about it. And then like 3 months later, Chrome would be like, it's solid, we're going to ship it. And then even more fire would get lit under all these butts, and all these people would be like, and so they'd show up like at the last minute after all this time, and they'd be like, you can't do that thing. And we'd be like, where were you for the past 15 months? Like you can't just show up and throw a wrench in a bunch of spokes. But oftentimes they did. And sometimes it was very good. Sometimes they would show up and they'd be like, hey, like a good example is centering something over the anchor that you want to be on. So let's say you're a tooltip and you want to be centered on the top it's just a classic tooltip position. Used to be a programmatic task. You would calc your own width minus 50% of whatever. You'd have to do the math to center the thing relative to the width of the tooltip's render itself. It didn't feel tedious at the time, but in retrospect, it's quite tedious. And now there's just a keyword. The keyword just does the math for you. That happened because WebKit, people from Apple showed up right there at the end of when we shipped it, and they said, this could be simplified. And we said, that's awesome. Yes, it can. These are great suggestions. And we had to undo. So there's like a Chrome version, like 3 Chrome versions with a old name of a property. And so, yeah, we did not want to do that. People don't want to deprecate things. It's a huge, nasty process to deprecate things. And there's even a lot of safeties put into the browser to make it so it's easy to pull something if it doesn't go good. Which is, there's so much code inside the Chromium code base. That code base is football fields of code. It's wild.
So you've worked on a bunch of these features. You've talked about scroll snapping and stuff like that. It's just kind of amazing how much code that kind of gets rid of and moves. Like I go to your demos, and it's just like I click on the HTML. I'm like, okay, that's reasonable. I go to JavaScript first just to check, and it's like, oh, there's maybe like 20 lines. Then CSS is like 500 lines of scroll snapping specific code. So I love all the features that have been coming out, but like in your opinion, what are like some of the highest impact CSS features that have landed recently? And maybe preview us some that you see on the horizon coming out that you think are going to be really useful.
Awesome. Yeah. So like a good example, like I recently talked about scroll at CSS Day, and to me, I recreated a crowning jewel scroll experience that hopefully you've experienced before, which is the Nintendo Switch scroll experience. It loads and your games wisp in and have this like stagger effect as you scroll. When they pop, they do a sound or whatever. It's like you've got this like audio experience. It's like, and that audio experience is as the element scrolls past the snap area, it audibly indicates that if you let go, this item will snap to that state. Then after you let go and it rests at the location, a different sound is made. There's as the element is scrolling into that space, the title of the game folds up over top so that the one that snapped has, and then the cursor, you can move the cursor. There's all these little micro interactions happening on the Nintendo Switch scroll experience is what makes you as a user go, this is simple and beautiful. But the reality is you break it down, it's hundreds of lines of code describing all those tiny, tiny little moments that give a user the sense of power and feedback. I recreated that in CSS. And it used all sorts of cool new features, including CSS anchoring, which anchoring is a huge, huge feature, packed with secrets. Same with scroll-driven animations. So the ability just in CSS to know if something's in view or not. So you're telling me React is coming up with this right now? I'm like, CSS can already do it. And if the node is hidden from CSS, display none, I don't even know what React does at that point. But I think it's just already ran its course. So it's like React ran its course, rendered the node. CSS is like, nope, you're not in view, so you're not rendered. Scroll-driven animation can know the width of anything at any time without JavaScript. It's almost like an intersection observer just given to you via CSS. And then with the opportunity for hooks to animate it in and out of the view as it's coming in. You've got has. So has is in there. You've got scroll state queries to know if you're snapped. Is it stuck? things that used to take a junky amount of JavaScript to determine and would often be kind of janky in the way that they worked. And so, yeah, that particular demo, and I've commented it really heavily. You can find it on my blog. Just goes through this wildly cool list of all these things came together in this one moment to create this really nice experience. And yeah, there's about 20 lines of JavaScript in there, mostly just to prompt audio sounds, and to handle like a couple of edge cases. Like if you click a title, if you click an item, it should scroll it into the snap area, stuff like that. So yeah, there's tons of stuff there. Has is still, I think, more powerful than people treat it. They still think of it like a parent selector. It's a universal selector. That thing can, any state that's on the page anywhere can be used by has to tweak something else somewhere else. It's wild. So you got this declarative, reactive selector. That's really, really cool stuff. Custom properties, people still barely use them, how they're powerful. So like Open Props was a project I made. The goal was just to collect all the amazing props people put into a variable. Make it easy to go use them. Because a CSS variable is, here's fun. Okay, CSS variables are not typed. They're like JavaScript var. You can put whatever you want in var. You can also reassign var to some other type. You are a pixel. Now you are a color. Now you are a string. Now you're a number or whatever. So like both these were very loose in the way that they were defined. And with app property in CSS, you can type safe a variable. So if someone tries to assign a value to it that is outside of its approved type list, it just doesn't assign at all. It always has a valid value. It's a guaranteed valid value that cannot be broken. JavaScript doesn't even have that. We get type security at assignment time, but if something wrong happens, it breaks. It doesn't revert to the last known good value. Wouldn't that be amazing? Maybe not. Anyway, CSS does. And so you have these opportunities with CSS variables to both be typed and untyped. And the untyped ones, these loose ones, so it's pretty much all the open props, they can have anything in them they want. Anything. And people put wild stuff in them, and that makes them wildly useful because you can have an entire shorthand declaration in one variable. It's like, you want a badass gradient? It's gradient 1. Boom. You don't even know what's in it. It could be 5 layered background images, and you don't have to care. So yeah, custom properties are still kind of underused. Oh, geez, there's some view transitions. People are still not using those as good as they are. Also, those have a couple limits that are kind of weird, especially if you're in a framework. If you're in React specifically or any framework where you don't control the render function, view transitions are not that great for you. But they're still cool, and you should still go learn what they are, because like that's a fast pet. Like I was doing interviews for new jobs recently, and they're like, okay, so make this render in there or whatever. And I'm like, cool, I'm going to animate it now. And they're like, you don't have time for animation. I'm like, watch. And I'm like, all I do is wrap the render function with document.start view transition, and now I have pseudo elements for before and after, and I can animate them however I want. It's like the first line of code in my JavaScript makes them all fade in as they transition in the DOM, and then the next one just says do it something cool, and I've got pre-made keyframes in open props. You just assign a keyframe to the element coming in, and boom. Now, anyway, it's really, really cool stuff there for DOM manipulation. So we've got scroll-driven animations, view transitions, has, anchoring. All the color stuff is great. All the gradient features are making more vibrant, beautiful gradients than ever before. All the new units, I don't know, I could just keep going. Pretty much everything that's been added is very meaningfully being added, and has a use case in my tool belt at least. But yeah, check out my blog, nerdy.dev. I'm going to keep firing off all the cool stuff. You can follow me there. I got RSS or whatever.
That's awesome. As we wrap up, we always like to ask a future-facing question, and I think the question to ask you is pretty obvious. What do you think the future of CSS and the web in general? What does that look like, and what are you most excited about?
I have spent a lot of time thinking about this. I've even thought about rewriting the way you write it. Like, how could I make it better? Like, CSS is funny, right? We've seen CoffeeScript, and we've seen Kotlin, and we've seen Swift. We've seen all these supersets of powerful languages, and CSS has some preprocessors, but nothing has radically changed it, and everything still outputs CSS. And then CSS is so simple and powerful that it can like be in an Arduino, and it can be in, it's like, what is the next generation of that? I just kept thinking of there's a CSS article about their mistakes. So just like Node has the 10 mistakes we made, CSS has one too. It's before Node did it. And CSS did it first. CSS was first typed. Anyway, I'm going to stop that little gong. But okay, so those regrets in there are, some of them are like really obvious. It's like, why don't we make a new language that just doesn't have those regrets in it? Kind of like Dino did. Dino's like, well, I wrote the regrets. I'll just go ahead and make a new version that doesn't do the things I regretted. And I like Dino too. And for those reasons, I like Dino. But the thing is, it's like, as I tried to think about some sort of superset, it still ended up being property value pairs. Like, here's the thing that I want to change to this. And there's still like some sort of selector mechanism. I'm of this, this is going to be like a wild sort of a assumption here, but like, as I'm working with specs, I could imagine a space where we aren't writing CSS as much anymore. CSS is being written for us, just like our JavaScript is being written for us, and our components are being written for us, and our pages and our, right? We're one-shotting entire applications. That we start to get more subjective in the way that we describe it. Much like art is described, you see a little description next to a piece of art. It's got all these words. Like, I could see designers being really micromanaging about the words that they're using in the spec. And then this future where a committee makes a couple changes to the spec and they don't even know what the app's going to look like at the other end. So imagine staging isn't a predictable thing. Imagine staging could wildly change a couple of views, the whole layout and arrangement and the colors used on it and the way that the light and dark modes interact, just because you changed a few spec things. And then you would go there and validate whether or not you liked the output or not, and then promote that to production. So instead of micromanaging your functions and your styles, you start micromanaging the value that you want out of the application, the important user journeys, the tenets of the application, and then of course a huge file documented about the style that you're going for. And then it's LLMs, whether it's this year or in a couple years, get so good at taking all that context that they very effectively produce a desirable output at the other end that we aren't writing CSS anymore. As much as I don't like to think about that, it still seems like a reality. And I kind of would like that because I want other people to participate in this process. I want other people to feel like they can make apps. It's been kind of in our hands for too long. And CSS will still get powerful. And then it'll just so users will get these features just because they asked for a scroll snap carousel or whatever, right? And the browser's like, well, cool, I don't need JavaScript for that anymore. Or not the browser, the LLM will say, I don't need JavaScript for that anymore. I'll use all these CSS features, and poof, we get this like handshake scenario. So I don't know. I still think at the end of the day, nothing in 30 years has drastically changed or has taken hold like CSS has. We've seen CSS and JS. We've seen it written as JavaScript objects. We've seen people writing them in string literals. We've seen adopted style sheets. We've seen so many different ways to Benihana CSS. But at the end of the day, we still put it back together in the shape of a CSS file. And I've tried some wild... do you remember Palm OS? The Palm OS is like an operating system back in the day. They didn't have CSS. They had all the objects and all the components were just JavaScript objects nested. So imagine like one big JavaScript object and a nested element would be like an element. It's almost like you're managing the tree in JavaScript, and all your styles went in there too. A single file. It got unwieldy so fast. And then you had to learn all these magical new terms that were like, oh, it's not font size, it's text size. You're like, oh God, okay, this is and it just kind of like didn't land. And I don't know. I've never seen anything take it over, and I'm not sure if we will. I think AI will just take it over. I don't know.
Reminds me of EXTJS, which I had the pleasure and misfortune of using in what feels like a different life.
That was a jQuery mobile competitor.
Yeah, they were really trying to like you do everything, including styles in JS as well. So it was like this kind of like object structure that like at runtime sort of build out a bunch of stuff on the back end. But yeah, it's hard to beat the classics. And I think also it's like the cultural weight of CSS. It's just been around for a while, really shaped how we think about doing style. So
I don't think modern apps would exist on the web today if like they hadn't added CSS. Like I can't imagine any of them thought that just adding a way to style the page a little bit back then would make it go from documents to like full-fledged apps in like just a matter of like a decade and a half.
Yeah, they definitely didn't know. Oh, it's fun. Like, just go look at all the competing proposals too. Like JSS was one, JavaScript style sheets. That's from like the 90s. So it's kind of funny to see that CSS1, they went through a lot of the iterations that JavaScript felt like it was doing. Hey, look at this. We could write styles this way. And you're like, they tried that actually in the 90s, and we all decided this was better. But okay, you can still build time it. That's great. Yeah, you do you. But yeah.
Okay, that wraps it up for our questions today, Adam. Thanks for coming on. This was a super fun conversation about all the work we've been involved in. And I just want to say thank you for working on those specs. Those features are awesome and just make the web better. So thanks for coming on and talking about them.
Of course, y'all are cool. Keep doing the show. I'm going to still listen, even after I've been on it.
Thanks, Adam. I don't think I've learned so much in a single episode. So like hats off to you there. Always got the educator hat on. So we really appreciate you coming on.
Of course.